What's going on, YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is Shoeshine Joe back at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes in this video. You will find history definitions, scripture information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning, the truth. Keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best overstand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, young elder gang. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. Now, before we get deep into the 13 colonies, first, you must understand this. Let's break down what a charter really is and why it mattered so much in the age of exploration, colonization, and even now. Think of it as the king or queen's official permission slip. It's also, in simple terms, paid me. A legal document that allowed people to claim land, build settlements, businesses, and govern in the king or queen's name. It was the king or queen's way of saying, you have my blessing or go with your move, but you play by my rules, and I need my money on time. Without a charter, starting a colony business was not just risky, it was illegal. Colonizers needed this document to avoid being seen as trespassers or rebels. The charter set the rules. It defined boundaries, named leaders, and spelled out exactly who was in charge and what they could do. It was both a rule book and a business contract, laying out the expectations for everyone involved. The monarch expected a cut of any wealth found, usually a tenth of gold or silver. This was a way for the crown to profit from distant lands without ever leaving England. The main goal? Make England richer and more powerful by tapping into new resources and expanding its influence across the globe. Charters turned risky adventures into state-sanctioned businesses. Investors and settlers could take big risks knowing they had royal backing. They provided the legal foundation for everything colonists did, from building towns to trading goods and making laws. The charter outlined how profits would be shared, who would govern, and how decisions would be made in the new land. It was the blueprint for government, profit, and expansion, a master plan for building a new society. In legal terms, a charter is a formal, written document that grants rights, privileges, and powers to an entity, such as a city, bank, business, a corporation, or a school. It's essentially a foundational document that defines the organization's structure, powers, and responsibilities. This is a document that incorporates a municipality, defining its organizational structure, highest laws, and the rights and responsibilities of its citizens. It's often seen as a local constitution, with city ordinances being subordinate to it. For a corporation, this is the document that establishes its legal existence, defines its purpose, and outlines the rights of its shareholders. It's equivalent to the Articles of Incorporation. These are public schools that are granted more autonomy than traditional schools and are often operated under a charter that specifies their mission, curriculum, and accountability measures. A charter is a legal document granted to an individual or corporation. It outlines the purpose and structure for the creation of a colony, city, or organization, as well as the rights each organization will have. Keep in mind, each city has a charter. In a business context, a charter is also known as Articles of Incorporation or Articles of Organization. These terms are used when referring to the legal document that officially establishes a corporation or other business entity. Additionally, the term Certificate of Incorporation is sometimes used, particularly in the context of a corporation. This is the most common alternative term for a corporate charter. Articles of Organization. This term is used for the equivalent document for limited liability companies, LLCs, or limited partnerships. Certificate of Incorporation, this term, often used synonymously with Articles of Incorporation, is the official document issued by the state after a corporation has been formally established. A charter and a license are both the same, a permission granted by a governing body or king. A license or charter are all contracts. Charters and licenses are typically used to create new entities or to grant specific rights or privileges to existing ones. Charters and licenses ensure that the higher power get their cut off everything you do. Charters made the European citizens see it as their license to claim land, even if it was already home to others. The charter gave them a sense of entitlement and authority. The charter justified colonization and gave the crown a stake in every venture, making colonization a national project. It was the first step in transforming North America into part of the Moors British Empire, setting the stage for centuries of change. Every colony began with a charter. No charter, no colony. It was the essential first document. The document was the colonists' proof of royal support, their shield against rivals and doubters. It was the law, the business plan, and the king's signature all in one, rolled into a single, powerful document. The charter made colonization official, profitable, and legal, turning dreams of a new world order into reality. That's why, when we talk about the first American colonies, we always start with the charter. It was the foundation stone for everything that followed. The first English colonies was started by hustlers and criminals. They were working for companies. These joint stock companies were like early corporations, funded by investors hoping for big returns. Investors pooled money to pay for ships, supplies, and labor. Their goal? To make a profit, to make some money. This started your stockholders and shareholders. The Virginia Company of London, for example, got a charter from King James I to find gold and a route to Asia. The Jamestown colonizers were company employees, sent to make money for investors. When little gold was found, they turned to tobacco, a new cash crop. This business-first mindset shaped colonial life. Labor was needed, leading to indentured servitude and later slavery, all for profit. Other colonies followed suit. The 1607 colony refers to the establishment of the Jamestown Colony in Virginia, which was the first permanent English business in North America. It was founded on May 14, 1607. While Jamestown is the most well-known 1607 colony, another English settlement, the Popham Colony, was also established in Maine in 1607, though it was short-lived. In 1607, Captain John Smith was a key figure in the founding of Jamestown, the first permanent European colony in North America. The expedition was funded by the Virginia Company of London, a group of private investors who sought to establish a permanent business in North America and profit from its resources. The Virginia Company was indeed a business, specifically a joint stock company owned by the Lords of London, Blackhand, and King James I, who was a Moor. The group of private investors were known as adventurers, included merchants and others who sought to profit off the natives as slaves under the doctrine of discovery. The Virginia Company's primary goal was to generate profits for its shareholders, making it a business venture. While the company aimed to establish total colonization, it was fundamentally a business enterprise with the expectation of financial returns on the investment. The company received a royal charter from King James I, which granted it the authority to colonize and govern the territory in Virginia. King James I of England's royal charter and the Lords of London funded the first trip that established the first permanent European colony in North America, Jamestown, which laid the foundation for future English colonizers. It was called Jamestown because of King James I. Keep in mind, this is business. It's nothing personal. The phrase, "it's just business, not personal," means that a decision or action is being taken based on professional or objective considerations, rather than personal feelings or animosity towards an individual. It implies that the action is motivated by factors like profit, efficiency, or strategy, and not by any personal vendetta or dislike. Now, when I finish telling you this, you're going to know why Donald Trump held the Bible upside down in front of St. John's Church, which is a Masonic code flip. Also why Nancy Pelosi in February 2020 ripped the Bible, which is an encoded charter by King James I. They try their best to cover all this up with the fake news. This really was the end of the contract and spell. Yes, King James I of England, who later authorized the translation of the King James Version (KJV) of the Bible, funded this expedition of people coming to America to destroy them. After they developed more knowledge about the natives, they needed a tool to enslave them with. So 4 years after the first landing, they came up with the great idea of the King James Version (KJV) of the Bible to use to enslave the Native American people. King James I of England was a Freemason and a Knights of Templar. King James I of England authorized the translation of the King James Version (KJV) of the Bible, which was published in 1611. While he did not write the translation himself, he commissioned the project to create religious divisions and solidify his own power. A group of 46 Freemasons, divided into 6 companies, worked on the translation, with Richard Bancroft, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and overall, William Shakespeare, his lover, overseeing the project. The Freemasons were tasked with creating a tool that could transform the indigenous people into slaves to serve the masters. The New Bible only had 66 books. Now, as we tell you this, keep in mind about the doctrine of discovery and the Spanish Inquisition. 1478, Queen Isabella and Christopher Columbus, 1492, and how they used sneaky tactics to bypass the Moors. Many colonizers came to Turtle Island as Knights of Templar spies for the Inquisition. They studied the natives of Turtle Island for over 100 years. Then they made their move. They recruited 105 men and boys with various skills, professions, and occupations necessary for the colonizing, including doctors, some surgeons, and scientists. The expedition including carpenters, blacksmiths, bricklayers, a barber, soldiers including special agents, artisans, laborers, and a preacher with the Word of God. The soldiers and special agents trained in discrediting targets through psychological warfare, public humiliation, smearing individuals and tribes using forged documents and by planting false reports in the tribes, harassment, kidnapping and imprisonment, illegal violence, and assassination. They were trained on how to be cunning and conniving. Special agents were trained to disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of these tribes and especially their chiefs. The scientists were trained in biological warfare, dark magic, and blood magic. Biological warfare, also known as germ warfare, is the use of biological toxins or infectious agents like bacteria, viruses, or fungi to intentionally harm or incapacitate humans, animals, or plants. It is a form of warfare that utilizes living organisms or replicating entities to achieve military or political objectives. Biological warfare involves the deliberate release of harmful biological agents with the intent to cause disease, death, or incapacitation. These can include a wide range of pathogens, such as bacteria, for example, anthrax plague, viruses, for example, smallpox, Ebola, and fungi. Biological agents can be disseminated through various means, including aerosols, contaminated food or water, and direct contact. Biological warfare can have devastating consequences, including widespread disease outbreaks, high mortality rates, and significant societal disruption. They trained for 8 months. Then in 1607, they were ready to conquer the new lands. They were the English elite, made mostly of European Moors. The expedition was funded by the Virginia Company of London, a group of private investors who sought to establish a permanent European business in North America and profit from its resources. The Virginia Company was indeed a business, specifically a joint stock company owned by the Lords of London, Black Hand, and King James I, who was a Moor. The group of private investors were known as adventurers, included merchants and others who sought to profit off the natives as slaves under the doctrine of discovery. The Virginia Company's primary goal was to generate profits for its shareholders, making it a business venture. While the company aimed to establish total colonization, it was fundamentally a business enterprise with the expectation of financial returns on the investment. The company received a royal charter from King James I, which granted it the authority to colonize and govern the territory in Virginia. King James I of England's royal charter and the Lords of London funded the first trip that established the first permanent European colony in North America, Jamestown, which laid the foundation for future English colonizers. It was called Jamestown Cause of King James I. Keep in mind, this is business. It's nothing personal. In May 1607, English colonizers set up on Native Americans' lands within the territory of the Powhatan Confederacy. The scientists who were trained in biological warfare put it into blankets, clothes, and food which was offered to the natives as gifts. In these gifts were diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza, to which Native Americans had no immunity. These diseases spread rapidly, causing significant population loss. They would kidnap Native American little girls who were childbearing age. They would impregnate them, hold them captive until they were showing, then release them back to their tribes. The Native Americans didn't believe in abortions. The colonizers brought that ideology with them when they came to Turtle Island. So they had to keep the babies. This is how the dirty Moors begin to work their way into the vine, into the blood of the Native Americans, with hopes of stealing their land through the matrilineality system. This term describes the tracing of kinship and descent through the female line. In matrilineal societies, important aspects like property, names, and even social status can be passed down from mothers to their children, especially daughters. Children in a matrilineal system are considered members of their mother's family and clan. They used misdirection and espionage. They were turning chief against chief and tribe against tribe. Espionage, spying, or intelligence gathering, as a subfield of the intelligence field, is the act of obtaining secret or confidential information. A person who commits espionage on a mission-specific contract is called an espionage agent or spy. As the European Moors kept stealing land, they encroached on more and more Native American lands, leading to increased conflict. The tensions escalated into the First Anglo-Powhatan War, 1609 to 1614, a series of conflicts fueled by competition for resources and territory. King James I of England granted charters, leasing agreements, to the Virginia Company of Plymouth, also known as the Massachusetts Bay Company, to establish colonies, business, in America. These charters authorized the companies to settle different, overlapping areas of the eastern coast of North America. The Plymouth Company was specifically chartered to settle the area between 38 degrees and 45 degrees north latitude. The Virginia Company of London and the Virginia Company of Plymouth were essentially two branches of the same organization. The Virginia Company, created to colonize the region of America known as Virginia at the time. The London Company was authorized to settle between 34 degrees and 41 degrees north latitude, while the Plymouth Company was authorized to settle between 38 degrees and 45 degrees north latitude. This meant that the areas of their potential settlement overlapped. The Virginia Company of London established the Jamestown Colony in 1607, while the Plymouth Company established the short-lived Popham Colony in present-day Maine in the same year. The Massachusetts Bay Company, while seeking religious freedom, was also a business venture. They needed trade, fishing, and shipbuilding to survive. The company's structure made mass migration possible. From the start, colonies were startups, backed by investors driven by commerce. The business model was the foundation for every new settlement. The American colonies were, above all, investments. The 13 colonies didn't appear overnight. Each one emerged over time, shaped by unique ambitions and circumstances. They were founded over a span of 125 years of wars with the natives, each with its own charter, backers, and a vision for what the New World Order could become. Some colonizers were started by powerful companies seeking fortune, others by ambitious proprietors hoping to carve out their own domains, some by colonizers running from the Spanish Inquisition, and a few were established directly by the king himself, reflecting royal interests and control. But no matter who founded them, all colonies were expected to generate wealth and resources for England, the crown, and the Pope, fueling the empire's growth. Virginia was the first, founded by the Virginia Company. Its economy quickly built on the cultivation and export of tobacco. Massachusetts followed, established by Moorish Zionist Puritans under a company charter, seeking both religious freedom and economic opportunity on the natives. In September 1620, 102 Pilgrims set sail from Plymouth, England, aboard the Mayflower. They arrived in the New World in November 1620, landing at Cape Cod before establishing Plymouth, Massachusetts. The Moorish Zionist guys, also known as Pilgrims, landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts on December 21, 1620. They arrived aboard the Mayflower after initially landing on Cape Cod in November 1620, funded by King James I and the Lords of London, Black Hand. The Moorish Zionist guys, Pilgrims' mission in 1620 Plymouth, Massachusetts, was primarily to establish a colony where they could practice their religion freely, away from the Church of England's Inquisition authority. They also sought economic opportunities and hoped to secure their Jewish language and heritage. This group of guys, known as separatists, had previously fled to the Netherlands and many other places being chased before deciding to embark on the voyage to the New World. When the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth in 1620, the most immediate and devastating impact on Native Americans was the introduction of European diseases. Measles, chickenpox, influenza, and other illnesses caused a catastrophic decline in the native population, with estimates suggesting up to 95% mortality. This great dying significantly weakened native societies and disrupted their way of life, making them more vulnerable to future conflicts and displacement. Remember, Malcolm X famously stated, "We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us." This quote is a powerful and often cited expression of his perspective on the history of Native Americans being reclassified as blacks, Negroes, and colored in the United States, and the systemic oppression they have faced. By stating that Plymouth Rock landed on us, he highlights the fact that dark-skinned Native Americans were already here when they landed on Plymouth Rock. Also, he is implying that before it was called Plymouth Rock, the natives called it by another name. New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Rhode Island spun off from Massachusetts, each gaining their own charters and identities as distinct New England colonies. In 1623, Captain John Mason received a land grant from the Council for New England, which included the area that would become New Hampshire. He then sent settlers, including David Thompson and the Hilton brothers, to establish fishing and trading settlements. While Mason never personally visited New Hampshire, he is considered the founder due to his role in establishing the colony and naming it after his home county of Hampshire, England. While not directly involved in the initial settlement, Captain John Mason played a crucial role in the colony's development. He received a land grant and sent people to establish fishing and trading posts. He later named the area New Hampshire after his home county of Hampshire in England. So, under King James, the first charter in 1623, the New Hampshire colony was set up. David Thompson, along with Edward and William Hilton, established settlements in what is now New Hampshire. Before the arrival of European colonizers, the area now known as New Hampshire was inhabited by various Algonquian-speaking tribes, primarily the Abenaki and Pennacook. It's said that they called the land Panaway or Pennacook, and some parts Abenaki. These groups had their own distinct cultures and languages, and they lived in settled communities, fished, gathered plants, and engaged in trade. The Abenaki, in particular, are known for their related dialects, and are sometimes referred to as the people of the Dawn Land. These colonizers took over Panaway, near modern-day Rye, and Dover. They were primarily for fishing and trading. These shores where the Native Americans once fished for their food was cut off by colonizers to starve them out. David Thompson, a Scottish Moor explorer, is credited with the first settlement at Odiourne's Point, while the Hilton brothers, Edward and William, are known for establishing the first permanent settlement, business, at Dover. You ever heard of Hilton Hotel? Hilton Worldwide owns or manages a vast portfolio of hotel brands, totaling 22, including luxury brands like Waldorf Astoria and Conrad, as well as more accessible options like Doubletree, Embassy Suites, and Hampton by Hilton. They also have brands like Canopy by Hilton, Curio Collection, and Hilton Garden Inn. Additionally, Hilton operates a loyalty program called Hilton Honors. King Charles was born in Fife on the 19th of November, 1600, the second son of King James VI and the first. King James VI became King of Scotland in 1567, when Mary was forced to abdicate. On the death of Elizabeth in 1603, he became James I of England. He is thus known as James VI and First. In 1590, he married Anna, the sister of the Danish king, Christian IV. King James died in 1625 and was succeeded by his son, King Charles I. In 1632, Charles I of England granted a monopoly license to the reconstituted Guinea Company for transporting white enslaved people. The Maryland colony was chartered by King Charles I of England, who granted the royal charter to George Calvert the Moor, the first Lord Baltimore, in 1632. After George Calvert's death, his son Cecil Calvert, the second Lord Baltimore, inherited the charter and oversaw the settlement of the colony. Maryland became a haven for Catholics and a profitable enterprise for Lord Baltimore, blending religious refuge with business interests. In 1632 to 1634, the Maryland colony was established by George Calvert, the first Lord Baltimore, and his son, Cecilius Calvert, the second Lord Baltimore. While George Calvert initiated the process and secured the charter from King Charles I, he died before the colony was officially settled. Cecilius, as the second Lord Baltimore, then oversaw the establishment of the colony and its early governance. Before colonizers called it the Province of Maryland, prior to the English settlement, the area was inhabited by various Native American tribes, including the Piscataway Confederacy. The first English settlement was St. Mary's City, established in 1634. The Piscataway called it Tamare, The colonizers translated this as Terra Maria in Latin, meaning Mary's land, the land of Mary. In 1636, both the colony of Connecticut and Rhode Island were established, though they were not formally chartered until later. Roger Williams the Moor, exiled from Massachusetts, founded Providence plantations in Rhode Island, while Thomas Hooker the Moors led a group to settle in Connecticut. Neither colony received a formal royal charter in 1636. Charters for both came later. Rhode Island's first charter, the Patent of 1643 to 1644, was obtained by Roger Williams after he returned to England. A royal charter was later granted by King Charles II in 1663. Also in 1636, Thomas Hooker led a group from Massachusetts to establish settlements along the Connecticut River, including Hartford. This group drafted the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut in 1639, establishing a self-governing colony. The Fundamental Orders are considered the first written constitution in the American colonies. Connecticut's royal charter was granted by King Charles II in 1662, confirming its boundaries and governance. In the 1400s, the areas that would later become Connecticut and Rhode Island were inhabited by various Native American tribes. These tribes were part of the Algonquian language family. The land was considered a gift from the Great Spirit and was not viewed in terms of private ownership by these indigenous peoples. The Mohegan and Pequot tribes inhabited the region that is now Connecticut. The Narragansett tribe and other smaller tribes under their sovereignty resided in the area that is now Rhode Island, west of Narragansett Bay. The Wampanoags also occupied southeastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and the islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. It is important to note that these areas were not referred to as Connecticut or Rhode Island in the 1400s, as these names were introduced by European settlers much later. The region was inhabited by indigenous peoples, speaking various dialects of the Algonquian language family. The earliest documented European contact with the indigenous peoples of Rhode Island occurred in 1524 by Giovanni de Verrazzano. The name New England was applied to the coastal lands from Long Island Sound in the south to Newfoundland in the north by Captain John Smith in 1616. The Middle Colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, were a diverse mix of royal grants and proprietary ventures, attracting colonizers from across Europe. The Delaware colony was initially founded by the Swedish as part of the colony of New Sweden, with the first permanent European settlement established in 1638 at Fort Christina, now Wilmington, by Peter Minuit. While the Dutch established a settlement earlier, it was not permanent and was followed by the Swedish settlement. The Dutch established a settlement called Zwanendale, near present-day Lewis, in 1631, but it was short-lived. In 1638, Peter Minuit, who had previously been the governor of New Netherland, led the Swedish expedition that established New Sweden. The Swedes founded Fort Christina at the site of present-day Wilmington, marking the first permanent European settlement in Delaware. The Dutch later took control of the area, establishing Fort Casimir near present-day Newcastle in 1651. The English eventually seized the territory from the Dutch in 1664. Delaware was later granted to William Penn and became part of Pennsylvania until it gained independence in 1776. Delaware holds the distinction of being the first state to ratify the United States Constitution. William Penn chartered the Delaware colony. While originally part of the grant to Penn for Pennsylvania in 1681, the three lower counties, later Delaware, were deeded to him by the Duke of York in 1682. Penn sought this land to provide Pennsylvania with access to the ocean. In 1681, King Charles II granted William Penn a large tract of land, including what would become Pennsylvania. Charles II was born in London in 1630. Under his grandfather, King James I, and his father, King Charles I, England had seen a growing amount of religious discontent between the people and the church. In 1682, the Duke of York, who had control over the region, deeded the three lower counties, Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex, to William Penn. Penn's acquisition of these counties, which would later become Delaware, was strategic. He wanted access to the Delaware Bay and the Atlantic Ocean for Pennsylvania. Although the region was part of Penn's grant, the residents of the lower counties did not readily embrace being governed by Pennsylvania. In 1704, Delaware established its own separate assembly, marking a step towards independence from Pennsylvania. In 1776, Delaware officially declared its independence from both British rule and Pennsylvania, becoming a separate state. Before European colonization, the area now known as Delaware was called Lenapehoking by the Lenape or Delaware people. They also referred to the river and bay as the Lenapewihituk, meaning rapid stream of the Lenape. The name Delaware was later given by English colonists derived from Lord Delaware, the first colonial governor of Virginia. The Carolinas began as a single colony, later splitting into North and South, both thriving on lucrative rice and indigo plantations. The Carolinas were founded by a group of 8 English noblemen known as the Lords Proprietors, who were granted the land by King Charles II in 1663. They were rewarded for their loyalty to the crown after the English Civil War. The 8 Lords Proprietors included the Earl of Clarendon, the Duke of Albemarle, the Earl of Craven, Lord Berkeley of Stratton, the Earl of Shaftesbury, Sir George Carteret, Sir William Berkeley, and Sir John Colleton. Prior to 1400, the area now known as the Carolinas was inhabited by various indigenous peoples. These groups had their own names for the land and their territories. The area was referred to as Carolina or Carolina in European maps and records from the early 1600s. The name of that land was called Catawba. The Catawba tribe was one of the most powerful in the region and lived in areas surrounding the Catawba River Valley in both North and South Carolina. Yeah is wa hare, meaning people of the river, was what they called themselves. Over 30 different tribes inhabited the region that would become North Carolina, speaking languages from the Siouan, Iroquoian, and Algonquian language groups, examples including the Cherokee, Cheraw, Saponi, Socotan, and many others. Before 1400, the Carolinas consisted of various indigenous territories, each with its own name and cultural heritage. The names used today, like Carolina, were imposed later by European colonizers. The New York colony, initially known as New Netherlands and later New Amsterdam, was founded by the Dutch West India Company in 1624. They established a settlement on Manhattan Island, which they named New Amsterdam. In 1664, the English seized control of the colony and renamed it New York. King Charles II of England granted a charter to his brother James, Duke of York, for the territory that included New Netherland, which was then renamed New York. This charter, granted in 1664, gave James's authority over the land and allowed him to govern it. The English renamed the colony New York in honor of the Duke of York. King Charles II granted a charter to his brother James, Duke of York. This charter essentially transferred ownership of the Dutch colony of New Netherland to the English crown and specifically to James. The Duke of York became the proprietor. In a business context, a proprietor is essentially the owner of a sole proprietorship. This means they are the sole owner of all the business's assets and responsible for all its debts. They are the legal and exclusive owner of the business. The proprietor owns the business outright. They are responsible for all aspects of the business, including profits, decision-making, and debts. There is no legal separation between the owner and the business, meaning the proprietor is personally liable for all debts and obligations. The proprietor has complete control over the business's operations and decisions. Sole proprietorships are generally easy to set up and operate, according to Investopedia. The proprietor's personal income tax return typically reports the business's profits and losses. The Duke of York then held the power to govern the territory, including appointing officials and making laws. The colony was renamed New York in recognition of the Duke of York's new ownership. In 1686, Governor Thomas Dongan issued a charter for New York City, which allowed for the election of aldermen and assistants. Before being called New York, the area now known as New York City was called New Amsterdam. It was the main settlement of the Dutch colonizers of New Netherland. The Dutch established New Amsterdam at the southern tip of Manhattan Island. Before the Dutch arrived in New York, the area was inhabited by the Lenape, also known as the Delaware people. The Lenape occupied the area known as Lenapehoking, which included present-day New York City, New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, and part of Delaware. They were an Algonquian-speaking people and had a rich history in the region for thousands of years before European colonization. The colonial history of New Jersey began in 1609 when Henry Hudson first claimed the region on behalf of Holland and renamed it New Netherlands. The Dutch West India Trade Company subsequently gave out land grants to encourage colonization. attracting many migrants from Sweden as well as Holland. The New Jersey colony was founded by Lord Berkeley and Sir George Carteret. They were granted the land by James, Duke of York, who had received it from King Charles II of England. The colony was named in honor of Carteret's birthplace, the Isle of Jersey. Pennsylvania was William Penn's grand experiment in religious tolerance, and a carefully managed investment in land and people. English Quaker William Penn founded Pennsylvania in 1681, when King Charles II granted him a charter for over 45,000 square miles of land. Penn had previously helped found Quaker settlements in West New Jersey, and was eager to expand his Quaker colony. Before 1400, the land that is now known as Pennsylvania was the homeland of several Native American tribes. Some of the major tribes who inhabited this territory during that period included Lenape, also known as Delaware. The Lenape were among the earliest inhabitants and had a strong presence in the eastern part of the region, especially along the Delaware River. The Susquehannock tribe primarily inhabited the area along the Susquehanna River. The Erie resided in the northwestern part of the region, specifically near Lake Erie. It's important to remember that these lands were inhabited by indigenous peoples for thousands of years, before the arrival of Europeans. The name Pennsylvania, meaning Penn's Woods, was given to the territory by King Charles II of England in 1681 in honor of William Penn's father. Georgia, the last to be founded, served as a buffer against Spanish Florida and offered England's poor and convicts a chance to start a new life in America. James Oglethorpe, along with 20 trustees, founded the colony of Georgia in 1732. He envisioned it as a haven for debtors and the worthy poor from England, as well as a buffer zone to protect South Carolina from Spanish Florida. The colony was named in honor of King George II. In 1732, King George II of England granted a charter establishing the colony of Georgia. The charter was given to a group of 21 trustees, led by James Edward Oglethorpe, who envisioned the colony as a place for English debtors and the worthy poor to resettle. The charter also aimed to create a buffer zone between the British colonies and Spanish Florida. Before the 1400s, the territory of modern Georgia was known by different names depending on the region and the time period. The eastern part, known as Iberia in ancient sources, was called Kartli by its inhabitants. The western region, known as Colchis in ancient times, was called Egrisi or Lazica. The unified kingdom of Georgia, formed in the late 10th and early 11th centuries, is also referred to as Sakartvelo by Georgians. This was the name for the eastern Georgian region from ancient times, known to Greek and Roman writers as Iberia. The western Georgian region was referred to as Egrisi or Lazica, and by ancient Greeks as Kolkis. This is the Georgian endonym meaning land of the Kartvelians, and is used to refer to the unified kingdom and the country in general. Formed in the late 10th and early 11th centuries, it encompassed both Kartli and Egrisi, and is also referred to as Sakartvelo by Georgians. Even colonies with charitable or idealistic goals like Georgia were ultimately shaped by economic motives and the promise of profit. Every colony was a calculated investment, with investors and backers expecting returns on their risks. The Roster of Colonies reads like a list of business ventures, each with its own charter, economic plan, and vision for success. At the heart of it all, profit was always the driving force, shaping the destiny of the 13 colonies from the very beginning. The real mission behind the colonies? Money and power. Colonies were economic assets, supplying England with raw materials and new markets. This was mercantilism, using colonies to enrich the mother country. Laws like the Navigation Acts forced colonial trade through England, maximizing profit for the empire. In the South, cash crops like tobacco and rice made planters rich, but required massive labor, fueling the slave trade. In New England, survival meant building industries, fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. Even religious colonies needed strong economies to last. Success was measured in exports and profits, not just ideals. The colonial economy was built for England's gain. The pursuit of wealth shaped every decision. The colonies were businesses first, communities second. The land wasn't empty. Native Americans had lived there for millennia. But English charters claimed it anyway, justified as just business. Colonists argued that if land wasn't farmed like in England, it was unused and up for grabs. Treaties and purchases were often based on misunderstandings. Native Americans saw land as communal, not something to sell forever. Colonists treated these deals as permanent real estate transactions. When legal tricks failed, colonists used force. Wars over land, like the Pequot and King Philip's Wars, were seen as business costs. The phrase, "just business, nothing personal," rationalized the dispossession of native peoples. Profit always came first. Colonization devastated Native Americans. European diseases wiped out entire communities. Colonists' hunger for land led to relentless expansion, pushing native peoples off their territories. Treaties were broken, and violence was common. Wars like King Philip's War destroyed tribes and led to enslavement. The fur trade created dependency on European goods and overhunting. Traditional economies collapsed, replaced by exploitation for colonial profit. Native societies were dismantled by the business of colonization. The cost of colonial profit was the destruction of native worlds. For colonists, it was business. For Native Americans, it was survival. The legacy is loss on a massive scale. Jamestown was a business venture from day one. The Virginia Company sent employees to find gold and riches, not to build a community. Their focus on profit nearly doomed them. Starvation and disease followed. Tobacco saved the colony, turning it into a cash crop economy reliant on indentured and enslaved labor. Jamestown's survival was all about business. Plymouth's Pilgrims also needed investors. Their voyage was funded by the London adventurers with a contract to send back goods. The Mayflower Compact was partly about keeping everyone working for the company's profit. Plymouth struggled to pay its debts, and tensions with investors ran high. Eventually, the Pilgrims bought out their backers to gain independence. Even religious colonies were shaped by business deals. Both Jamestown and Plymouth show no business, no colony. Profit drove every decision. To truly understand colonial America as a business venture, it helps to compare it to the British East India Company, one of the most powerful corporations in history. The East India Company was a massive joint stock company, wielding enormous influence. It ruled over vast territories in India, maintained its own army, and traded luxury goods like spices, tea, and textiles across the globe. In contrast, American colonial companies, such as the Virginia Company, were much smaller in scale but had surprisingly similar powers, granting land, making laws, and even governing entire settlements. The key difference was in their approach. The East India Company traded with established civilizations and tapped into existing wealth, while American colonies had to create value from scratch, carving new societies out of wilderness. Colonists settled, cleared forests, and painstakingly built new economies based on bulk goods like tobacco, timber, and other raw materials rather than luxury items. This process required not just a few trading posts, but mass migration, entire families and communities crossing the Atlantic to start new lives. The American model led to settler societies with local governments where colonists made their own laws and managed their own affairs. Over time, these settlers began to see themselves not as mere company employees, but as English citizens with rights and a voice in their own governance. This growing sense of identity and autonomy set the stage for the movement toward independence. Both were forms of corporate colonialism, but America's business model, rooted in self-governance and mass settlement, planted the seeds of revolution and change. The relentless drive for profit shaped both empires but ultimately led to very different outcomes for the people involved. The American colonies grew into an independent nation, while the East India Company evolved into a corporate state, ruling millions. In the end, the business models they chose made all the difference, shaping the destinies of entire continents. The American colonies were founded as business ventures. Charters, companies, and investors drove colonization for profit. The goal enriched England and its backers. This business-first approach fueled growth, innovation, and migration. It also led to tragedy, land seized from Native Americans, and slavery entrenched for profit. The justification was always just business. The skills learned in colonial commerce helped spark the revolution. The colonies became too successful and too independent for Britain to control. America's strengths and sins both grew from its business roots. The nation's story is one of risk, reward, and exploitation. Understanding the colonies as businesses reveals the complexity of America's origins. The pursuit of profit shaped the country's character, and its contradictions. The legacy of those bottom-line decisions still echoes today.